I want you to turn over now, if you will, to the book of Genesis and the 29th chapter. Jacob ran away, went back up there to Haran, looking for his uncle Laban. And in chapter 29 says, Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the sons of the east. The city of Haran was located. Looked and he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it. And people would come up and roll a stone away from the well so they could water the flocks, and there was a group of women there with some of the flocks. And he said to them, in verse 5, do you know Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, we know it. And he said to them, is it well with him? And they said, it is well. And behold, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. And he says in verse 7, behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep and go pasture them. But they said, we cannot, until all the flocks are gathered. And they rolled the stone from the mouth of the well. Then we watered the sheep. And while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came about when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. Because here, just this, unbelievably good fortune. He gets up here, and no sooner does he start looking around and starts asking. Somebody says, well, there she is right there. There's the daughter of the fellow that you're looking for. And so he's thrilled, and he embraces her, he kisses her, he weeps, and he tells her, who he is, and she goes back and tells his father, verse 13. So it came about when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And so Jacob tells him about all of these things that have led him to come up here. And Laban basically says, well, you're welcome to stay here. Verse 15, Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak. King James Version says she had tender eyes. But Rachel was beautiful of form and face. And, the exact wording of it's a little bit uncertain perhaps, but the point's pretty obvious. Rachel was a pretty one. Leah, maybe she had a nice personality, but Rachel was the good-looking one. And so he fell in love with Rachel. Verse 18, now Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. And Laban says, well, it's better to let her marry you than somebody else. Sounds like a good deal. So he serves 7 years. And the romance in verse 20, they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. That's kind of hard to imagine. But anyway, then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her. So they have the wedding festivities arranged. Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now it came about in the evening that he took his daughter Leah. After all the festivities, the night has come. And Jacob, of course, is now going to go into the wedding tent that night to be with his bride. It came about in the evening that he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob went in to her. And in verse 25 says, so it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. Now, this is, you can imagine waking up in the morning and you think you've gone into the tent here with your beautiful new wife, and you wake up and it's her less than quite so attractive, or however the polite way to say that is, it's her sister. It's her ugly sister. Maybe she wasn't ugly, but anyway, it's it's the wrong one. And so what in the world has happened? And you can imagine, he goes running off to Laban and he says, what is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? Laban says, well, it is not our practice. It's practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. We just don't do that, Well, he says, tell you what, you work, 7 more years, and I'll let you have the other one too. Man, that's terrible. Do you realize what's happened here? I mean, what had Jacob done to his father Isaac? When his father Isaac couldn't see was blind, the darkness of his old age, eyes being set, probably had cataracts or something like that. Jacob, at the behest of his mother, had swapped younger brother for older brother. And now what happens? Now it's dark again. This time he can't see because his wedding tent, of course, has made his night dark. And what's happened to him? Somebody has taken the younger sister that he was supposed to get and put the older back in the first place. And the swap is, we sometimes have the expression poetic justice. Well, this is kind of a case of poetic justice right here, where God has basically made him, well, Proverbs say you dig a pit and you'll fall in it yourself. He dug the pit and he's fallen into the very pit that wound up digging for somebody else. But the thing is, this is not the end of the deception that Jacob would suffer. This is only the beginning. He does, in fact, stay there and work another 7 years, ends up with both wives and with 2 handmaids as well, and eventually with 11 of the 12 sons that would be born to him, all there in the land of Haran. And he continued to work for many years for his uncle Laban as a shepherd. And then Laban began to cheat him. Cheated him not only in the matter of his daughters and which ones he was going to marry, but cheated him in terms of his wages as a shepherd for him as well. We won't look at all the details of that, but finally the situation became so bad that in chapter 31, if you'll turn there, Genesis chapter 31 says, Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that is our father's, and from what belonged to our father has made all this wealth. Jacob saw the attitude of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly toward him as formerly. And make a long story short right here, Jacob was out in the field one day, and he sent and had his wives brought out to him. And he said, look, he said, things have gone sour here, and your father is cheating me, and we're not even going to go back home. We're going to leave right now. And they did. They left from right out there in the field and headed out to go back down to the land of Canaan, the promised land. 31st chapter tells of their journey back to the promised land. And I want you to turn, if you will now, over to chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32. Jacob has now gotten almost back to where he had left, almost back to the promised land. But of course, he's come back as many years later, but he's still got a really angry brother that he left behind a long time ago, Esau. You know, what's happened during all of this span of years in between? Is Esau still going to be waiting there to kill him? Or will Esau have mellowed some with the years? What's going to happen when he gets back? And he's worried about that. We're told in chapter 32 and verse 3 that Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall you say to my lord Esau, Thus says your servant Jacob. And notice the wording right there. He says, you address him, you say, My lord, your servant says. And so he says, I've become rich. In verse 5, you go tell him, says, I have oxen and donkeys and flocks and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find favor in your sight. And so the messengers go, and they come back. And they say, we found Esau, and he's coming out to meet you, and he's got 400 men with him. Well, this is not exactly, something that would, set him at peace of mind. My brother that I cheated, my brother's coming to meet me with 400 men. He had plenty of reason to be afraid here. Verse 7, then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. And he splits his family and his flocks and herds and everything into 2 different groups, so that if one is attacked, at least the other might be able to escape. And he sends some of them on ahead and stays behind himself. And then, in verse 9, it says, and Jacob said, it's interesting, the first time in Scripture, all the chapters about the life of Jacob thus far, it's the first time we're told that he prayed. We're told that God appeared to him, but this is the first time we're told that he prayed. And one wonders if maybe praying was something he had to learn to do. And maybe he has learned. Maybe some of the things that he has suffered now, some of the deception that has been practiced on him, particularly by his uncle Laban, has maybe given him a new perspective. Indeed, it certainly appears when you look at the content of his prayer in verse 10. He says, I am unworthy, praying to God, I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and all the faithfulness which thou hast shown to thy servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. To me, that really signals a change that has taken place in the case of Jacob right there. I mean, not only is he addressing his brother as his Lord and saying, I'm your servant. We might say, well, maybe he'd do that just out of fear. But here I think there's a real sense of humility. I think this fellow changed. I think the Jacob that ran away was a scoundrel. The Jacob that comes back is a chastened man. He's a man that has learned a lot by suffering the same type of deceit that he had practiced. And I think that God's judgment upon him, God's chastening, has made him a better person. And so he comes back now, and the heart of his prayer is, I am unworthy of all the things that I got. It's not, Lord, isn't that neat how we tricked my brother? It's, Lord, I don't deserve any of this, really, do I? And, when we can pray like that, when we can start a prayer saying, Lord, I really don't deserve any of this, do I? Then I think we're a lot more likely to find God's favor than otherwise. And he asked the Lord to deliver him from the hand of his brother Esau. And he sent some presents ahead to his brother Esau, and indeed their meeting was amicable. They were reconciled.